Okay, here we go. Let's take a look at the Nick Symmonds vs. Ryan Trahan 100-meter race and see if we can figure out an accurate time by analyzing the frames. So here I have identified the start of the race by looking for the first movement after they become still. So if we switch back and forth between these first two frames, you can see their first movement. Now if we keep going several frames forward, we can see that Nick's timer does not start until sometime between the 10th and the 11th frame. When recording in 30 frames per second, each frame is equal to 0.033 seconds. So up here, this time doesn't even start until about 3/10 of a second after they start moving. So now let's look at the finish on this video. Obviously this is a pretty crappy shot to be able to tell exactly where he finishes. However, we can use a shot from his first race video to help us figure this out. So this is the finish line shot from the first video. This is the closest frame that I could get to his torso being in line with the finish line. We can see here that his last step before he crosses the line is a couple feet or so from the finish line. The key here though is looking at the angle of his foot here right before he crosses the finish line. We can see that he's got a pretty good angle of plantar flexion and his foot is about to come off the ground when his torso is pretty close to the finish line. So now let's go back to this shot and see if we can pick out the frame that is closest to that angle of plantar flexion. So here we're going to keep moving frame by frame. He's still not to the line yet, still not to the line yet. And then here is his final step before the line. His foot is flat on the ground right here. So let's go one more frame now, and you can see that his foot is still pretty much on the ground. His heel is about to come off. One more frame, and his foot is coming off the ground, but maybe not quite the angle of plantar flexion that we saw in the previous shot. And then onto the 28th frame, it appears that his foot has just come off the ground, so maybe this is a little bit past where he finishes. So I think the closest that we can get is that his finish time should be somewhere in between 27 and 28 frames. So 11 seconds and 27 frames would put us at 11.90 seconds, but we can add a little bit more onto that just because he's not quite finished yet. So I would estimate this to be around 11.92 seconds or so. Although timing Nick's race like this does not account for reaction time, so he could probably expect to add another 0.2 seconds or so onto this time. So there you have it. 11.48 seconds is a little bit off.